everybody's circumstances are very different. Right. In terms of who they're trying to bring to the country and how it's gonna look and for them and who's gonna be around who and, it's a very different circumstance. And the truth is, the kids are already there and they're in studies. You really choose your own
I
city.
think the first question is really, where are your people, like their community? Like we weren't gonna have an Israeli, like that. We wanted Canadian, we wanted American, like that kind of stuff.
And
Morning.
So,
absolutely.
and then affordability.
Mobility, so there's so many factors.
Yeah.
It's great. It's great.
Okay. I think we're ready to get started. So we were learning the laws of Shutfim. I think this is where we're up to, but I'm just going to double check. For some reason, that's not opening. Let's see if this will open. Okay, we'll start from here. Im echad mehashutfim meis. If one of the partners in a partnership passes away, batla hashutfiso ha'esek. So the partnership is de facto null, or the business. Ve'afal pi sheisnu lizman kavua. Even though they had negotiated that the partnership would last for a certain amount of time. And therefore, the corporation has to be dissolved and divided. He says, but if the surviving partner doesn't dissolve the partnership and continues the business, then he still has to split the profits between himself and the heirs of the partner. Now, it could be that that this is, and we'll get more into this later in the next section. But obviously, if there are papers that are drawn up for the formation of the partnership that allow for what happens upon the death of one of the partners, so then usually that would be probably drawn up when you.
Probably extremely prudent is brought up.
Yeah, it would be very prudent to draw it up because, upon the death of so and so, what happens to the property or what happens to the business?
That's a disaster. Experienced it.
Really? What you mean when they don't draw it up?
Deal with Italian clients, all 90 years old, very successful. Nursery, that's where I got my flowers from. The nursery was the biggest
Nursery?
garden nursery.
Uh-huh.
And the Italian guys kind of shit together. Now the kids are involved. It's a disaster.
Yeah.
It's standard to put in partnership agreements with that exact clause, succession, and then what happens on death.
Yeah.
Standard.
Okay. Shutfim shelo kavu zman. Okay, sheba hazman lachlokes hashutvis v'hashutavenu nimtza be'iru chedayma. If the partners did not establish a time for the dissolution of the partnership, or the time has come, but one of the partners is not available, Hashutaf Hasheni yachol lachlok ba'atzmo, v'litol ischekol chelko b'shutvus mibli yedias chavero. Then the partner that's present does have the right to unilaterally dissolve the company to take his portion. In other words, he can do that without consulting the other partner in the event that the other partner is not available. He's let's say out of the country or somewhere else. However, it must be done with an objective third party, a beis din, who will, they don't have to be rabbis necessarily, but it has to be done in front of three people who are reliable and trustworthy individuals who will be able to oversee the valuation of the business to make sure that a guy is not taking more than he's entitled to. And if a person does split the merchandise or anything else in the partnership without that team of valuators, these three people that we would call a based in, his actions are null and void. And if anything has gone up in value or gone down in value during that interim period after he split it without the based in, then everything has to be split properly, because you can't say, well, I took half of the business and it went up 20% since you've returned, but I'm entitled to keep that. No, you're not, because your division of the assets was not done properly. V'chol zeh dafka shecholku beperos o yayin sheyesh yayin tov v'yesh yayin garua v'chayotze bazeh b'dvarim halolo tzrichim shuma. But this is all when we're dealing with the types of merchandise which vary in value. So let's say we're not dealing with widgets, we're dealing with barrels of wine or other types of consumables where there's, wheels of cheese. I just saw a video clip of these master cheesemakers in Italy, where they spend their whole lives, and they pass down the tradition to their children and their grandchildren, and how they make these Parmesan wheels, and that are 30, 40, 50, 100 years old, and they're like
Well past the best before date.
a gajillion dollars a pound, or whatever. And but each wheel is unique in its flavor, is unique in its value. So let's say I have a warehouse of Parmesan wheels, okay, from Italy, and the partnership is being dissolved, and we have to split the wheels. That has to be done in front of a group of valuators, because each wheel of cheese has a separate valuated price, or just like different barrels of wine. But if the partnership was merely a matter of dissolving liquid assets, cash assets, so then then the dissolution can be done even without three people supervising it. And basically, you can leave the other half of the assets of the cash assets with the bastin, and appoint them as basically the custodian over that portion of the partnership. By doing so, you're letting them know that you no longer wish for the partnership to continue. So a person could unilaterally dissolve or shut down a company, but you can't do the division of assets unless you have a supervisory panel that makes sure that the division of assets is fair. If there are no assets left, and it's just a question of selling the building, let's say, and then splitting the proceeds from the building, so then you probably would need someone to supervise the sale of the property to make sure that the guy is going through proper channels to sell the building. But once the building is sold and all you have left, after all the merchandise is gone and after all of the property is gone, all you have left is cash. That can be divided without any supervisory position. I guess maybe as long as you have an accountant overlooking, seeing what's going on. Okay. Next, Shimon v'Levi shahayu shutfim be'iza esek. Berotze echad mehem libkor eschalko l'reuven. Let's say Shimon and Levi are partners in a business, and one of either Shimon or Levi wants to sell his share to an outsider. So Shimon decides, you know what, I don't want to be in the business anymore. I'd rather sell to Reuven. So Levi has a right to stop the sale. In other words, you cannot unilaterally sell your portion of the business to another person. You have to get the approval of the partner. Why? Because Levi could always say, I was happy to be your partner, but I don't want to be partners with that guy in the business. So that seems to be pretty reasonable, right?
Rabbi, are we assuming that each partner owns the same amount? Because there are
Yeah,
situations. Okay.
there are, yes, you're right, Wayne. There are situations where you have, let's say, someone is a minor partner, right? He only has, let's say, a 5% interest. Could he sell his interest, his 5% interest? I think it'll all depend on whether he has a controlling portion, whether he has a controlling vote in the company. Anyone who has a controlling vote in the company and he's prepared to sell that to somebody else, the other partners could say, no, it has to be with our agreement because we may not want to do business with that guy. He's going to make our lives a living hell, you know? So I don't see that it would make any difference from a logical standpoint, whether the guy is a 50-50 partner or whether he's a 20-80 partner. As long as the portion that he's selling will give the guy he's selling it to a vote at the table, he shouldn't be allowed to do it without getting the blessing of the other partners.
Rabbi, Rabbi.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's say there's three partners and one of the partners wants out. Can one of the two remaining partners would like to pick up his share? Should he? Does he need to get the okay from the other partner?
Right. Who has rights of first refusal? There's I guess there's a couple of questions in there. Let's say there's three partners and the guy who's departing, let's say it's Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. Shimon says, I'd like to sell my portion to Levi. And Reuven says, well, I don't think that's not going to work well for me because then he'll be a 2/3 partner, I'll be a 1/3 partner, and then he'll have the final say in anything that we do. So it would seem that Reuven would have a right to say, no, the two of us will buy out your portion. Each one of us will pay 16 and what is it, 1/6% or what? Yeah, 16 and a 6% of the company from you. We'll split the third in half. They probably have each partner probably has a right to argue that. The next question is, what if Reuven says, or Shimon rather, Shimon is leaving the company and he says, I'm going to sell my share in the company. Does he have to give rights of first refusal to the other partners, or can he sell it to whomever he wishes? Well, based on what we just learned, that the partner has a right to stop the sale, it would seem that he should also have rights of first refusal, just like a bar metzra. Remember, we learned the halacha of a bar metzra, which is someone who doesn't own the property at all, but he has rights to say, offer it to me first, because I'm adjacent to that property. So logic would dictate based on that, that if a person who is adjacent to a property has first rights of refusal, certainly a partner has first rights of refusal to buy out the partner before he sells it to somebody else. Okay. Now, the question, of course, is what if the guy, the partner who's staying in the business keeps nixing the people that the guy wants to sell the business to? Like the guys are in a partnership, and every single person that he puts forward, the guy says, no, that's not going to work for me. Well, then there's always an option of dissolving the partnership, right? Because you can't let's say you can't blackmail a partner who wants to retire or leave the business by saying, no, you can't sell it to anybody. It'll have to go to Beis Din, and the Beis Din will have to make the determination that the surviving partner, the partner who's staying, just as being unreasonable, and they'll just dissolve the partnership. So he quotes in the footnotes, he's quoting the Pischei Tshuva, who brings this from the Tzemach Tzedek, who writes that Vafilu Yimritzono Limkor Chelko Ba'ofen Shu Yeh Misaseh Kemikedem. Let's say the guy wants to sell his share of the company, but says, but I'll stay on as an employee. Can the other partners say, no, we don't want that. We don't want you to sell it to that other guy? Mikol makom yachol chavero la'akev alav sheyomer lo keven shaharevach lo yeh shalcha tit'atzel beha'esek shelo mala v'lo mori lo yim yeh revach o hefsid. So the other partner can say, no, I'm not happy with that either. Like even if you promise that you'll stay in the business for, let's say, another 10 years, I don't want you to sell it to that guy because I don't trust that guy. And even your presence here will not be the same as when you had a stake in the company, because you may be, a little bit more relaxed as far as how diligent you are to make sure that the company remains at a profit, because your attitude is going to be, hey, I don't have any skin in the game anymore, So if you have nothing to lose, you may not be as diligent, or you may take off every afternoon to go learn in the kollel instead of, dealing with the business. So that also he can stop. And he said, and what's the proof to this? It's from the Gemara in Bava Kama that says, and it's quoted by the Shulchan Aruch that says, Rishoin hachamorim lahasnos beinehem. So if you have donkey drivers, these are people who tend to donkeys. They can make a condition or a stipulation among themselves. Kol mi shetovad mimenu chamor mibnei hashayara, ma'amidim lo chamor acher, v'impashahu va'avad, ein chayavin lahamid lo. They can, let's say, as a partnership of donkey drivers. They jointly own a consortium of donkeys. And I guess they rent out the donkeys, or they do donkey rides, or whatever it is. They can make a condition or stipulation that if any one of the partners is out on a job with a donkey, and the donkey dies, they will replace that donkey from the herd of donkeys, unless he is negligent and the donkey is lost or dies as a result of his negligence. Then he will have to swallow the cost of the donkey. Avolim of the chamoro va'amar tnuli damim ve'ni rotza lika chamor v'hareni shomer imachem ein shomin lo. And if he loses a donkey and he says, you know what, instead of replacing the donkey, just give me cash for the donkey that that I need to replace, and I don't want to take a donkey. I want to just sort of leave the business and just give me the cash for the donkey. Ein shomin lo, elamaminu lo chamor acher. We don't listen to him. We don't have to attend to him, but we can give him a different donkey. Kadesh yizariz atzmo the yishmor behemto, because by just giving him cash, he may not be as careful, I guess, with the affairs of the company. He says, I'll still be a partner, but instead of working with the donkeys, just give me cash instead. Well, we're worried that you're not going to take the business as seriously. And that's true even if he still owns a donkey within the herd. But people will be more diligent when they own two donkeys versus when they only own one donkey. So we see that anyone who tries to change the terms of the partnership has to get the blessing of the other partners first. And the Shulchan Aruch, based on that, writes, Shem echad me'ashutim rotz limkor chatzi mechelko la'acher u'lihishar bisaskus ala chelek harishon tzarachian. He says, what if a partner has, let's say, 50% of the company, and he wants to sell only half of that portion to somebody else, but he'll retain a quarter of the company ownership, which is a very common occurrence. Person can say, I'm winding things down. I don't want to work as hard. I still want to be a stakeholder, but not a 50% stakeholder. So he writes, Tzarachi, and imefshar lidamosa lidin le'el, imamar tnuli damim, dichon lomar lo, im yelach achela gadol, tisasik yoser, b'shut v'sutishmer and yoser. So the argument could be that he doesn't have a right to do so, because the other partners can argue, by only holding a 25% share, you're not going to work as hard. and you're not going to make sure that everything is going as, you're not going to be as diligent in the supervision of the company. Ba'afilu im ha'acher yis'asek b'shutfus, b'zeh nira borer deha'acher micholim limchos v'cholom lomar lo, ein ritzanenu shiyu harbe damos b'maso matan shema yavo hezek mizeh. Harbe deos, rather, b'maso matan. And even though he says that, well, this new guy that I'm selling to, he's a brilliant guy, he'll be diligent and he'll be able to watch over it, the other partners could say, no, we're not interested in other opinions, entering into the company. Up until now, the company was owned by two people. Now you're going to split your portion into yourself and another guy. Now I'm going to have to contend with two opinions, potentially, instead of only one opinion that's going to dissent. Ulam ba'arch hashulchan mifsha pshita leishim rotza lite mechelko chelak la'acher v'hu yaso kimikedem ein hashutaf yochel la'akev ba'ado v'siyem sheken ikar ledina mibli shum raya litvarav yuyin sham. However, the Aruch HaShulchan is more lenient. The Aruch HaShulchan says that if a person wants to spin off his share of the partnership and sell out, and he still commits to work for an indefinite period of time for the company, then he's allowed to do so. But he doesn't really give a basis for saying that. So apparently this is a source of machlokas. The author of the Sefer doesn't accept the ruling of the Aruch HaShulchan simply because the Aruch HaShulchan doesn't document why he holds that way. He just says, it's obvious to me that as long as the guy is going to stay involved in the business, he's allowed to sell his portion. But it doesn't really make sense why that should be okay based on this argument that he gave. Okay?
Usually when somebody sells their business, the buyer wants the guy to stay for a period of time, just to keep the transition point.
Right. So there'll always be a transition phase, but that's assuming that, the remaining partner gave his blessing to the guy to get out and sell. And he said, yeah, you want to sell, that's fine. I endorse the person that you want to sell it to. He seems to be a reputable guy or a reputable corporation. That's fine. But you need to stay around in order to see that things are transferred properly. Yeah. Okay. Next. She'ela. Shutfin shehisnu b'neihem shelo yachloku b'shutvus ad zman katzuf b'tarach zeh v'zeh. Let's say partners decide we're going to dissolve the partnership on such and such a date. Let's say, January 1st, 2027. Okay? Ve'echad mehashutfin rotze lachzor bo mehashutvus v'lachlok bischora o b'mamon shenishar biyadayim. And one of the partners wants to dissolve the partnership early. He says, no, he comes in 2025 and he says, I want to dissolve the partnership. I want to divide the inventory, or let's just split our assets and move on. So who has the rights? Who's in the right in this kind of situation where there's a written agreement that the partnership will stay intact and still until a certain date? Can one of them still back out prematurely? That's the question. Are there what would secular law have to say about this?
Normally it's majority rules, and also since they already agreed, probably that would stand unless the majority wanted to change it. You can pass a resolution of appropriation that, even like at a board or something like that rescinds something from before. The question is, what degree of majority do you need, right? Half, 3/4, or?
Right. Right. I mean, obviously, as a lawyer, you would write up a document that says the partnership will not dissolve until January 1st, 2027. However, if a majority of stakeholders agree to dissolve it before then, it'll be accepted. It'll have to go to a vote. Okay. But let's say that clause does not exist, and all they have is an agreement that we're partners until January 1st. So the answer is shutvam shehisnu beineihem sheyamdu b'shutvus lizman katzuv shekavu beineihem einam yicholim lachzor bahem mehashutvus. So if they have a written agreement or they have, let's say, even a verbal agreement with witnesses that says that they're not going to dissolve the partnership before a certain date, then they don't have, neither partner has a right to unilaterally pull out. And neither of them can divide the merchandise or the assets until the company is completely without assets. Neither partner is therefore allowed to unilaterally withdraw the assets of the company and say it's my portion until that time arrives. No one has a right to do that. However, if, let's say, no time was ever established for the duration of the partnership, and so basically, they just said, let's go into business. We've been in business for 20 years. And one guy just basically says, I've had enough. And the other partner says, how can you say you've had enough? We're on the horizon of like going into this whole new endeavor, this whole new line, and I can't do this without you. How can you do this? The guy still has a right to say, listen, my wife is sick. I got it, a whole number of reasons where he says, listen, go get yourself another partner. So then then they can dissolve the partnership. Even one partner can unilaterally pull out and say, either buy me out or I'm just taking my portion of the assets of the company. Unless this is a type of asset that cannot be divided up, or if there's going to be a financial loss by dividing the assets, which is conceivable in a type of business where you need, let's say they had agreed among themselves that there was going to be a certain amount of reserves of cash in the account for an upcoming, let's say, a business transaction or a takeover of another company. And a guy at the last minute says, I've decided I want out of the company and I'm taking half the assets with me. The other guy can say, we've already made a commitment to buy this other company and you can't leave me in the lurch with only half the assets of the company because we need those assets in order to go through with the deal. So that, of course, will change the circumstances. Or if, let's say, there are assets in the company that the guy says, I can't run a business with only half the assets. The only way I can run the company is if all the assets are intact, which I guess you could conceive of, let's say, I don't know, there's probably a bunch of businesses that work that way, maybe even in the garment business. A person could say, there's no way I can survive the season with only half a warehouse of merchandise. I need a full warehouse. So then they would have to actually dissolve the company and just sell it outright. But one partner could force the dissolution of the company. He could force it. It's just that you can stop him from just saying, you don't have to dissolve the company. You can continue running it. I'll just take half the assets. That you could prevent him if it could be demonstrated to Beis Din that by him taking half the assets of the company has lost its value, has gone down much less than 50% of its value. Okay?
Partnerships are very tricky.
Yeah.
Very tricky.
Yeah. Well, they're tricky, but they can be very rewarding also. You always hear the horror stories, but you don't always hear the good stories.
Fortunately, I hear more of the horror stories.
Right. You're the cleanup guy.
Yeah.
What's that Harvey Keitel in Pulp Fiction, was it? Where he comes in to clean up the murder scene. That's you. You're the financial guy. Okay. So this is basic Bava Metzia, Bava Basra. that partners have a right to unilaterally dissolve a partnership at any time. But the other partner has the right to decide whether he's going to buy him out or just decide to dissolve the company. So it's based on a Gemara. First of all, the Shulchan Aruch writes, and the Rambam writes, Shutvin shehisnu b'neihem sheyamdu b'shutvus zu ad sheyagia hazman, v'nishtatfu stam v'lo kavu zman harei lo cholkin kol zman sheyirtza. If there's no set time for the partnership, no time limit was given, then either partner can dissolve the partnership whenever he wants. It's based on a Gemara. Hani beitrei da'avni iska bahadi hadadi v'ravach. Let's say we're in a business together. The business has made a profit, and one of the partners says, "Come, let's split our assets." So the other partner says, "No, I'd rather continue the business and make more money." So the other partner can stop him from doing that and basically say, "I'm out." Because of a kesef mishnah sham u'mefarsh rabbeinu du adin kishas oshutz was lizman katsuv sover otu ladin and nishtatva b'ma'osehem. Basically, it depends on whether there was a time allotted for this partnership or not. Yeah. Okay. Basically, you've committed. If the other partner says, well, we agreed we would stay in this business until 2027, and only then will we consider dissolving it, you've basically committed your money and your assets to that business until 2027. Okay. We'll hold it here for today. Have a great day, everybody.